My husband drained every cent of my hard-earned savings, without my permission, to buy a car for his daughter. That single act shattered something in our marriage. I'm 27. My husband, Michael, is 36. We exchanged vows 6 months ago, though our story began nearly 4 years back. Michael has a 16-year-old daughter, Carrie, from his previous marriage. But for the longest time, I was a secret in his life. He didn't introduce me to her until well into our relationship. And from the moment we met, she hated me. Carrie has always been fiercely close to her mother, Na. Even though her parents divorced 8 years ago and Na has since remarried, their bond never wavered. When I came into the picture, her mother wasted no time poisoning her against me. She spun a story that Michael had cheated on her with me, twisting reality into something ugly. Despite Michael's repeated attempts to set the record straight, that he and I met long after the divorce, Carrie clung to her resentment. To her, I was the intruder. The threat. The woman trying to steal her father's love. But that was never my intention. I didn't step into this relationship hoping to replace her mother. I only wanted to be a steady presence, a responsible adult she could count on if she ever needed me. I gave her space, let her set the pace of our dynamic, but no matter what I did, she wanted nothing to do with me. She refused to see me as anything other than an obstacle standing in the way of her father's past. I tried. Again and again, I tried. Gifts. Casual conversations. Relatable stories from when I was her age. Every effort fell flat. Every olive branch I extended was ignored, or worse, snapped in half. Then, a year ago, things changed. Carrie announced she wanted to live with Michael full-time. The reason? Our school district had a top-tier basketball program, and she had her sights set on playing through college. Michael was ecstatic. When he broached the subject with me, I won't lie, I hesitated. But he assured me this was an opportunity, a chance for Carrie and me to finally build some kind of connection. I wanted to believe him. So, I let myself hope. At first, it seemed promising. Carrie was content with her new school, adjusted quickly to our home. But her feelings toward me? Unchanged. She barely acknowledged my presence unless it was to criticize, dismiss, or outright insult me. Michael, for all his good intentions, wasn't the most involved parent. He didn't keep track of whether she finished assignments, snuck out at night, or spent time with the wrong crowd. But I noticed. And I cared. When I brought up my concerns, Michael agreed we needed to establish boundaries. Set rules. But enforcing them? That was a battle I never could have prepared for. Carrie treated every request, every basic household expectation, as an attack. Curfew? She defied it. Chores? She ignored them. The mere suggestion of mutual respect? Met with scoffs and complaints to her father about how I was controlling her. Then she'd run to her mother, twist the narrative, and suddenly Na was on the phone, screaming at me for mistreating her daughter. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Carrie invaded my privacy, walked into my office unannounced, eavesdropped on my calls, even scrolled through my personal messages. When I confronted her, she barely flinched. "I just wanted to make sure you're not cheating on my dad," she said, utterly unfazed. I was speechless. Later, when Michael sat her down to discuss it, she didn't apologize. Instead, she doubled down, telling him she believed I was just a gold digger after his money. The irony? I came from a wealthy family. My parents had given me everything I could ever need, yet I had chosen to build my own success. I worked hard. I never once asked them, or Michael, for financial help. I had even contributed to buying the very house Carrie now lived in. And still, she called me a gold digger. She refused to eat anything I cooked, going as far as throwing entire meals in the trash. At first, I thought maybe she just didn't like my cooking, so I made an effort, researched her favorite dishes, left meals for her in the fridge. But after the 4th time I found my food dumped like garbage, I stopped trying. If we all sat down for a movie, she'd leave or cling to Michael's side, making it clear I wasn't part of her world. If she needed to ask something, permission to go out, a school-related issue, she would whisper to her father, pulling him into another room rather than speaking in front of me. She wanted me to feel like an outsider. And it was working. But what cut deepest was her fixation on my relationship with food. I've struggled with a severe eating disorder since middle school. Though I had come a long way, some habits lingered, small plates, specific food combinations. I never explained this to her, but she noticed. And she weaponized it. She'd make cruel comments about my body, lacing them with fake concern when Michael was around. "Oh, that outfit makes you look a little chubby." But when we were alone, the mask came off. I wish my dad had married someone better looking. The taunts escalated. She mocked my eating habits, called me fat as an elephant, and one night at dinner, smirked as she said, "Don't you think you've had enough?" Something in me snapped. I had already had a horrible day at work. Without thinking, I shot back, "I don't care about your opinion. And from now on, unless it's an emergency, don't speak to me." Michael later told me I should have handled it better. That I should have been the adult. But where had his patience been when I needed it? For Christmas, I planned something special, a dream trip to Thailand, something I had been saving for since I was 18. I covered every expense, booking a breathtaking Airbnb with a pool and mountain views. A gift for all of us. Carrie hated it. She whined about the heat, refused to do activities with us, and spent half the trip calling her mother to complain. By the final day, I was sick, probably food poisoning. And Carrie? She looked at Michael and, with disgust in her voice, said, "Dad, is she pregnant? I don't want her to ever have a child." Michael scolded her, but the damage was done. When we returned home, her resentment only deepened. She ignored me completely, which, honestly, I preferred over the insults. But then she started doing the same to Michael. He tried to apologize, to smooth things over, but for the first time, she shut him out. One night, my parents visited, and she walked right past them like they didn't exist. I told Michael it was unacceptable. But as always, he made excuses. That's when I snapped. If she doesn't acknowledge me or my family, then I'll do the same. I won't pay for her school, her basketball training. I won't cook for her, wash her dishes, or do her laundry. You want to be the only parent? Then be one. Michael panicked. Tried to backtrack. That night, he confronted Carrie, but instead of a conversation, there was shouting. Then, a piercing scream. I burst into the room to hear Carrie's words like a slap to the face. "I wish Dad never met you. I wish you were dead." Michael, finally at his limit, exploded. "If you hate living here so much, go back to your mom." For the first time, Carrie cried. The silence between us all since then has been deafening. She no longer mocks me. But she barely speaks to Michael either. And somehow, that's what shocked him the most. Carrie's resentment simmered beneath the surface, an unyielding force poisoning every interaction. She barely acknowledged my presence, her silence sharp as a blade, and when Michael dared raise his voice in frustration, she turned on him too. Coldly, she reminded him of his duty, saying he should prioritize his daughter over his wife, that a real father would. Days bled into weeks, and the tension in our home thickened like an impending storm. Carrie's refusal to engage in conversation cast a heavy shadow over our lives, making even the simplest moments unbearable. Desperate to restore peace, Michael arranged a family meeting, hoping we could air our grievances and find a way forward. He apologized to her again, while I, suppressing my own frustration, expressed a genuine willingness to understand her feelings. I assured her that I wanted to make our living situation more comfortable for everyone. Silence stretched between us as we waited for her response. Then, Carrie cleared her throat and, without hesitation, laid out her demand. If we were truly sorry, we needed to prove it. Michael's brow furrowed. "What do you mean by that?" She didn't hesitate. I've always wanted a car. If Dad really feels guilty, he'll buy me one. Shock prickled down my spine. My eyes widened at the audacity of her request. We had been carefully saving for her college fund, something I had even contributed to. Did she not realize what she was asking for? Or worse, did she simply not care? Michael and I exchanged a glance, then gently explained why purchasing a car wasn't feasible right now. But Carrie wasn't interested in reason. She scoffed at our excuses, dismissing them like dust from her sleeve. In an attempt to meet her halfway, we suggested revisiting the idea on her 18th birthday, when our finances might allow it. Her response was immediate and unyielding. No. She didn't care about our situation, only her own desires. If Michael truly wanted to fix things, there was only one solution: give her what she wanted. Otherwise, she would continue to ignore him, turning our home into a battleground of icy silence. A cold realization settled in my chest. This wasn't just about the car. She was testing us, wielding her demands like a weapon to see how much power she held in this house. The meeting ended in a deadlock. Later that night, I sat Michael down, my voice steady but firm. You need to talk to her again. She has to understand that this isn't possible. Michael's shoulders sagged under the weight of the situation. Should we dip into our bonds? That way, we can afford it. I blinked, stunned by the suggestion. Absolutely not. Those were our retirement funds, our future. Sacrificing them for a teenager's whim wasn't just irresponsible, it was madness. And yet, just days later, while I was away on a business trip, my phone rang with news that left me breathless. Michael had drained our joint savings to buy Carrie a car. My savings. My emergency fund. The air felt too thin, the betrayal too vast to comprehend. He spoke quickly, justifying his actions with a guilt-ridden plea. She'll forgive us now, he insisted. Things will be better. We can have peace. I swallowed the fury burning my throat. For the sake of my marriage, I convinced myself to let it go. Maybe, just maybe, this would bring harmony. But I was wrong. When I returned home, reality slapped me in the face. That car wasn't ours. It was Carrie's. Exclusively. I learned this the hard way when Michael took our car to work, and I asked Carrie for the keys so I could run errands. She barely spared me a glance before spitting out, "You're not allowed to use my car." My car? The sheer audacity of her words sent a jolt of disbelief through me. My pulse pounded as I took in her smug expression, her defiance. Enough was enough. My gaze flickered to the keys resting on the desk. Without a word, I snatched them and walked straight outside. Carrie's voice followed me, sharp and indignant. "You can't just take my keys. That's stealing." I didn't even pause. Instead, I leveled her with a calm, unwavering stare. This car was bought with our joint savings. It is not just yours. If you want exclusive ownership, get a job, save up, and buy one yourself. Her face contorted in disbelief, but I wasn't finished. And if you want to call the police, be my guest. I'd be happy to explain how my hard-earned money paid for this. Her stunned silence was victory enough. Later, when Michael came home, Carrie wasted no time painting herself as the victim. He turned to me, exasperation written all over his face. "Why didn't you just take an Uber?" I stared at him, barely believing my ears. Carrie smirked behind him, satisfied with his response. I exhaled slowly, forcing control into my voice. "Tell me, Michael, why did you use my savings to buy a car I can't even use?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. She's struggling to adjust. We need to be patient. My patience had run dry. My patience had run dry. The weight of everything, the financial betrayal, the blatant disrespect, the refusal to acknowledge my sacrifices, finally broke something inside me. "If this doesn't change," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside, "I can't stay in this marriage." The words hit like a physical blow. Michael's face drained of color. You're not serious. But I was. Carrie had spent months making it clear she didn't want me there. And now, I was finally listening. Michael stammered, grasping for words, but I shook my head. I've tried. I've endured. But if you won't stand up for me, I refuse to be part of this any longer. That night, I packed my bags and drove to my parents' house. By morning, my phone was flooded with calls and messages. Michael begged me to reconsider. Carrie ranted about how I was punishing her dad. Even his ex-wife, Nina, joined in, calling me manipulative, selfish, a gold digger. I ignored them all. Over the following days, clarity settled in. My suffering had reached its limit. It was time for an ultimatum. When I finally agreed to meet Michael, I laid out the facts. Carrie and Nina had continued to vilify me, even after he tried to mediate. She doesn't respect me, Michael. And she never will. His expression twisted as I showed him the messages, proof of the contempt they held for me. His shock was genuine. I thought she was coming around. She isn't, I said simply. And I'm done waiting. I told him, in no uncertain terms, that I was withdrawing my share of the college fund. That the car, purchased with my money, would be transferred to my name. That I would not continue to finance Carrie's life when she saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. For once, he didn't argue. He agreed. He even begged me to come home. But I refused until Carrie was gone. 3 months later, my world had shifted. Michael confronted Nina, who finally confessed that Carrie had been sent to us because she had already driven her stepfather to the brink. In the end, a decision was made: Carrie would live with her grandparents until college. Michael, desperate to make amends, promised her weekly visits and even started encouraging therapy. He and Nina began saving for a separate car, one she would receive on her 18th birthday. And as for me, I returned home. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged there. I no longer walked on eggshells, no longer sacrificed for someone who refused to see me. And it was bliss. Now, it was up to Michael to prove if this peace would last.